Hey, Tessa.
Hey, John.
I thought I was going to be the last one here, see? How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hey, Julia. The Mavenlink gang.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My headphones never work when I initially put them on.
I have that problem sometimes too, or like where I get a Slack and then it all of a sudden just makes my earbuds just disconnect. It's a hassle.
Less than fun when that happens.
hmm
Sometimes it takes a minute. They're kind of gathering in a room probably right now.
Okay. So the goal for this meeting is really just to review a few of the standard reports, right? And then see if there's anything that's required before go live that they need.
You got it. Yeah, they may want to push some of their custom hours till after go live, like in January sometime. But they may want to use do some filters or different things, kind of to get ready for 1/1. So correct.
Okay. Cool.
They'll be doing all their financial reporting at a work day, so it's mostly like work-day stuff.
Okay. Great. And then it's still a TBD on if they're going to have time in Mavenlink.
That's what I hear.
Sure is.
Hmm.
Oh, I can be on camera too.
She'll see when I look over, it's at her.
We
Yeah,
do
it's like
that way too much.
We do.
It's like the Brady Bunch here.
There.
Hello.
Who are these people on my computer?
Usual suspects, right?
Well, I was trying to think though, when was the last time, if ever, Richard has actually talked to Tessa? It's been
Yeah.
a while at least. So this is Tessa. Tessa is our business intelligence
Oh,
consultant.
Tessa, hi. How are you?
Hi.
Yeah,
Good.
and she builds beautiful reports.
She does exist. We've been saying her name for a while now.
I have Jean with me as well.
Hey, Jean.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
And all right. Good to see you all again.
Yeah, so just to kick things off, so this is really geared around just kind of doing an overview on the reports, kind of the out-of-the-box reporting that we talked about.
Yeah.
And Tessa, I won't steal the thunder. I'll let you, if you want to kind of jump in and start doing your thing. But this is really the goal of today, just to kind of show you the out-of-the-box reports and kind of what would be available for 1/1 essentially.
Excellent. Can you send me the recording after this session, John?
Sure can.
Okay, thanks. To me and Jean.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Tessa, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Yeah, so I figure we start today by just reviewing a few of the standard reports that we have out of the box. They're available for you guys to use today if you really wanted to. And then we can always customize those that we have. So we can make clones of those and then make small or big changes to them. So simple things like adding filters, perhaps for the custom fields that you guys have. Things like adding, removing, oops. Sorry, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, my thing cut out for a second there. Things like adding and removing columns we can do too. And then of course bigger changes like adding a table or creating some brand new calculation, we can do that as well. So everything here we can clone and customize, and then of course we can start from scratch as needed.
Okay.
So I'm going to start by sharing, and I know you guys aren't going to be doing much financial reporting in Mavenlink, right?
Sorry, what's the question?
You guys aren't going to be doing much financial reporting within Mavenlink?
Are not going to. Is that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. So we will not review those reports. Just want to make sure.
I think I just want to say before you start this, I'm sorry for interrupting, but my goal with the report with the reports module in Mavenlink is I have to take into consideration the fact that I'm working with a lot of people in all offices that are not used at all to use reports on how are the projects going, or the status of a project, or an overview of a project. And they do have some reports, but it's super basic, and normally it just comes directly from finance. On top of this, so that's for project management, and from resource management. So everyone that books the resource, they're not used as well to have like very robust report. Most of them are built on spreadsheet, weekly, manually edited. So all this to say, I will probably be on the safe side of not throwing too many reports out there in first phase, because too much information will drive people insane. But and then maybe have people being more comfortable with the reporting, and actually understanding what to do with those reports, right? What kind of actions they can put.
So it sounds like you guys are lacking visibility today, and something is going to be a lot better than what you guys already have. And then we want to probably build in complexity maybe in another phase, but for now we want to keep things pretty straightforward and out of the box as much as we can.
My CFO would applaud what you just said.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to know. So it sounds like we're probably going to be doing some pretty simple edits then, and a lot of it's probably just going to be adding some custom fields and maybe making some small changes here and there.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, are you ready to dive in?
Yes, let's do this.
Cool. All right, so I'm just in a demo account right now, so none of this data is going to match what you guys have or will have, but it just has some more data so I can show you guys what the reports will look like. You'll notice that there's two reporting modules that we have here. One of them is analytics, and then the other is insights. Just a quick summary of the difference between those. Analytics is really Mavenlink's version of reporting. I like to think of it as reporting that we had before insights was a thing. So it's nice because it is very out of the box and it's driven by Mavenlink. The reports are a little bit older, so they're a little bit more simplistic. The nice thing is they're also real time. So Insights does have a 1 hour delay. So if you put some data into Mavenlink at like, let's say 9:45 a.m., it's not going to show up in Insights till probably about 10:30. Analytics is real time. So as soon as you put data into Core Mavenlink, it'll start to show up in these reports, which is great. Another component, they're not really as customizable. So if you liked some component of this report here and you're like, oh, I want to add a filter or I want to change how something is calculated, it's not possible to do that within analytics. These are, just they come as they are. You can't make any changes to them. So this is more.
No filters in analytics.
I'm sorry?
There are no filters in analytics that we could use, but we can filter down information in Insights reports.
Yeah, so Insights is probably where you're going to be living most of the time. Analytics are really just for, I honestly usually think of it as you just need to do a quick check on some data, like maybe someone tracked time, you just need to run a quick report to see what recently happened, or if you want to do some invoicing reporting, you can do that too. But most of the reporting that you'll be doing will probably be out of Insights.
Right.
All right, so diving into Insights, you'll notice when you guys are in your account, you're going to see this set of standard dashboards that hover over the standard section. These are the ones that are out of the box. You're probably not going to be using the financial ones such as margin, cost, fees, etc. But there's a wide variety of standard reports that exist. In your guys' case, we're probably going to clone these and then just hide the standard ones so that you'll be working off the ones that contain your custom fields. And we'll go through how to do that a little bit later. The first one I want to review is staffing capacity. This is one of our resource management sort of dashboards. It's a little bit newer, a little bit fancier. And this works exclusively off of allocations. So you guys aware of the master planning module here? When you go over planning, you can do the master planning here where you say this person is going to be allocated to work on this project, you know, for this amount of time. You guys are familiar with this module?
Yes, we are.
Great. So all this data flows into this dashboard. So that is where all this data is coming from. I'm going to change my date range a little bit just to get it going. And then switch out roles. Okay. So the staffing capacity dashboard, as I just mentioned, it all works off of master planning. This is the best dashboard to summarize where do we need to fill the gaps of our resource management. So when do we need people to work on certain projects and who is available to work on projects at a certain time. The first tab here, capacity, is just very high level summary where you can see these are all the roles that we need to fill time for. So this is the unstaffed demand. This is that component where you say, let me go to
So it's a demand from the resource planner, correct?
Yes, this is all coming from the master planning module where you're saying, I don't have a good example here, but this is essentially like the unstaffed demand component here. Oh yeah, is basically where you say, I know that I need an architect on this project for 764 hours. I don't know who my architect is going to be yet, but I just know that I need one. Typically, this sort of project requires an architect for this amount of time. So that'll flow into this section here. This is all that unstaffed demand, all the unnamed resources where you say, we know that we need some sort of role to work on this project for some given amount of time. I just don't know who's going to fill that role yet.
So it's just to be clear, it's feeding from the master planning. I got this, but is it feeding from the? I just saw an unnamed resource, the architect. No one is assigned yet, and it's a soft booking.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So and will it feed also from the scheduled hours that are not okay?
Right. Yeah. So scheduled hours are not in this report at all. This is exclusively via the allocations from master planning.
But one of the things Tessa could possibly customize might be a version of this that could include scheduled hours if you wanted. So we're going to want to prioritize all the different customizations you guys have because we have limitations on hours as well as timeline.
Yeah.
But that's an example of one way we could customize this to better meet the Sidley use case.
Okay.
All right, so one potential, yeah, like Jordan said, one potential customization would be to add scheduled hours into the mix of this report, or even have a version of this report that looks at just scheduled hours instead of the allocations.
Okay. I'll need to, of course, to check with like Stephanie and so on, but yeah, okay. Good to know.
Okay. All right, I'm just writing that down. Yeah, so this all flows from here. So again, this is that unstaffed demand, and then, ooh, this is crazy. Why is it doing that? But on the left here, this will summarize which of your roles tend to be most and least allocated. So this is probably more for like hiring decisions where you can see developers tend to be very, very busy in this case, or 91 allocated overall. So you might consider hiring more developers in that case. And then the roles with lowest allocations, this is the roles that are more on the bench. They don't have as many allocations. You might consider hiring less of those, or maybe putting them on more projects, or maybe having them work as other roles, depending on what kind of role it is. In this case, it might make sense for a subcontractor to not be super allocated because contractors often don't necessarily have the same allocation needs as other roles. Application maintenance consultant looks like they're not very busy either. Maybe you've had less projects where you need application maintenance consultants, etc. So this can be useful for getting a sense of overall which of our roles are most in demand.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the next tab. This one is a bit more of a granular breakdown of comparing that unstaffed demand with who's available to fill that demand. I'm actually going to switch this to all. And by the way, you can, of course, adjust all of these filters where you can kind of do some comparison based on how you filter these things. So for example, if I just cared about looking at my developers, I could just select developer and apply that. And that way I'm really honing in on what is my need for my developers and who's available to fill that need. So you can always adjust these filters. And this is one of those things where we can add custom filters based on the custom fields that you guys have. So if you have any user-based custom fields, for example, let's say like employee type or something, we could add that as a filter on here so that you're just looking at one type of employee at a time. So that's something that we can do as far as customizing this. So I'm going to switch back to all again. So what this is telling me is this table matches what we saw in the previous tab. It basically just summarizes these are all the projects where we have unstaffed demand, where we know we need some hours from a role, we just don't know who's going to fill that yet. And then these are the, this is the availability of the actual people who have this role. So what you might say, for example, is I know I have a cost analyst that we need for 373 hours. When we look at the cost analyst role here for availability, it looks like we have about 396 available, which means we could probably account for all the demand we have here. This should be able to fill this need here. Although we do have another one down here for 197 hours, which would probably bring up the total to something like 570 hours of total cost analyst demand. And again, this is where filtering can be useful too, where you just care about looking at your cost analyst and saying, all right, this is what our need looks like. We have about 570 hours. And it looks like based on how people are allocated today, we would not have enough people to fill this demand. So we would probably have to spread it out a little bit. Now, when we want to dive into the details of this, like when do I actually need to push off my projects, that's where the staffing timeline tab really comes in handy. This is arguably my favorite tab. This is really nice for getting a sense of, okay, these are the cost analysts based on that role. These are the two roles, like unstaffed demand roles that have demand. You can actually click into here and see which projects we have that demand for. So for this cost analyst, we know that we need 20 hours for this Apex project starting this week, starting this week. And then we could look at the availability of our users, and it looks like Alan is very busy, but he might become available starting in September 29th. So hypothetically, we could push off the project to start here and then staff Alan on it. We could also see what Alan is already staffed on. It looks like he's staffed on this ABC healthcare project. So we could say, I think that my Apex project is more important than my ABC healthcare project. So I'm going to take him off this one and we'll just put him on the Apex one instead. And then you can also note that Valerie's super busy too. Why is she so busy? And then you could actually look at this and we could see she's actually only soft allocated to the specific general project. Maybe this project hasn't closed yet. Maybe this is still in the pipeline. So maybe Valerie is not as busy as we think she is. Or maybe we'll just move her off this project because she's super busy anyway and we don't want to overload her. So you can kind of see how you can do some sort of analysis by comparing these tables here and just diving in. These are called drill-ins. Whenever you can hover over a report and it gives you this little hyperlink, you can click into it and it'll just take you to another table with more information zoomed into whatever you've clicked on.
And can you, when you say, maybe I want to allocate this resource to another project, do you have to go back to the master planning, or you have some allocation capabilities from the analytics? So inside.
Right, yeah, you'd have to go back into master planning. So typically we'd recommend actually having them open in two separate tabs or maybe even two different windows side by side so that you can kind of do that comparison.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on this tab?
No, and I saw that you can have different kind of views like graphs or chart or pie chart and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, right now these are just tables, but as you can see in the first tab, for example, we can have stacked bar charts, we can have line graphs, we can have pie charts, all sorts of fun things. And you'll see in some of the other reports that we go through, we'll kind of have a little bit more of those.
Okay.
All right. Next we have role availability. These next two tabs are pretty similar. They just summarize for your actual resources, for your actual people, how available are they and how much time have they been allocated. So this, again, is pretty useful for hiring decision purposes, where you can see cost analysts are really overworked in the next couple of weeks. Looks like things taper off a little bit in the future. But this might give you a sense of maybe we need to hire more cost analysts, or maybe we need to hire more developers. This is supposed to give you visibility into that. Looks like our energy specialists are really not busy, and neither are our lead accountants. They're all pretty free. And then you can dive into this, into the user availability tab, and actually compare, okay, so for my cost analysts, it looks like Alan's not even that busy, but Valerie is super overworked. We might consider putting some of Valerie's projects on Alan because they have the same role. So even though it looked like they were very overallocated, it looks like Alan's a lot less busy than Valerie is. So that might give you a sense of how to balance out that work, to see if there's any discrepancies there. Or even up here for analytics engineers, it looks like Kevin's been staffed on about, half staffed for some of his projects, but Raj is fully allocated until mid-September. So it kind of gives you a sense of how you want to distribute that work. And pretty commonly, you'll see this table on this dashboard where it has the user, the role, and then this hard available, hard soft available, and then this availability percent. The main difference here, hard available basically means if we only look at hard allocations, how much availability does each role have? This column takes into account both hard and soft allocations. So let's say we're just looking at 1 week, maybe let's do just this week. So let's say that these people have 40 hours of availability. Let's actually look at Susan. So if we look at what Susan has been allocated, it looks like she's been allocated 19 hours of hard allocations, and then probably 4 hours of soft allocations. So if you just look at her hard allocations, she'll be available for 21 hours this week. But if you look at both the hard and soft, she would only be available for 17. So this is kind of comparing, if we just look at the pipeline projects or things that she's only soft allocated on as well as the hard, how busy will she be? And then if we only care about projects that are totally committed, we know that she's going to do this. This is how available she'll be, how available she'll be.
So the hard available is pretty much in some way what project managers see from the resource planner. I mean, that's what they get, right? The hard availability.
Yes. Well, actually, in this master planning area, it's comparing. It's actually including both. So if we were to go to,
I mean, the 40, the 21 hours hard availability, a project manager from the resource planner window, that 21 number is what they see. They don't see the hard and soft availability. That's correct, Jordan. Is that it?
They would
Yeah,
see,
I think. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I
go
think
for it,
what
Jordan.
Richard is saying is on the resource planner tab within the project, the visibility that PM has is just the hard allocations, and that's 100% true.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're talking about. Oh, I don't have access in this account. But you're talking about like in the project when you're in the resource planner.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay. Yes. And yeah, so this is basically just looking at what is your capacity minus whatever you've been allocated, and that's what your availability would look like.
Excellent. All right. And just on the top right, I see unsafe view. You can. Is that a field that function that you can use in your preferred views? Okay.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So saved views essentially allow each person who is accessing the report to save the filters that they've set. So I'm not a manager in this account, but let's pretend that I am Sarah and I only care about people who are on my team. I'm a manager, and I only care about people who are under me, who I manage. If I don't want to have to go in and change this every time I come to the report and have to go to the filter and look for myself, you can actually save the view. I can call this Sarah's view. Views are not shared, so no one else would see this. Only I can see this as I'm logged in as Stephen. But now this view is saved, so I can easily just toggle to this view whenever I come to this report.
Nice.
Alrighty. And then next, allocations. This really is just a straightforward view of who is allocated when. Switch back to all. It's just all your people, all the projects, and the projects that they are allocated to. I think you can click in to see if it is soft or hard. Yeah. But it's a pretty straightforward view. This tab is really just for the clients who are like, I just want to see who is allocated to which projects and when. So this is just a nice little table, and it's nice because you can export it. All of these reports that we have, you can export. If you click these little 3 dots and then do download as, you can download as PDF, Excel, CSV, and you can also export the entire tab if there's more than one table on there by clicking on the gear icon and then export to Excel.
I know I said earlier there's no financial reports, but do you have the equivalent of this exact view showing me the equivalent in dollars?
Oh, so like the allocated fees. So
Yeah.
these hours times the bill rates. We don't have that, but we can build that.
Okay. So
Let me write that down.
okay.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna skip the last tab. Do you guys have any more questions on this dashboard? Anything else you want me to review?
No, that's pretty clear.
Okay. And one thing I want to note, you're going to see this blue eye at the top right corner of every standard dashboard we have. That takes you to the glossary. I think I sent it your guys' way a few days ago, but this just summarizes all the dashboards that we have. You could click into them. For example, I could click on staffing and capacity, and it just provides more information about what they do, who they're for, the kind of business questions that it answers, etc. So you guys can always take a look at this if you have any questions and you want to, dive into the specifics. This is a good reference for sure. I also know that our tech writing team is working on expanding this a little bit so that we'll have different articles for each of the dashboards. I know that we made one for utilization somewhere, and we're starting to do that for the other tabs as well. So we have a lot of good references for the standard reports in our Help Center.
Okay, that's good to know.
Alrighty, let's move on to the next one. I'm also going to show you guys resourcing. This is I kind of like to think of resourcing as the prelude to staffing capacity. So this was our main resource management dashboard that we had before staffing capacity was a thing. This one combines both scheduled hours and allocated hours. So you will see information about both of those things on this dashboard. The first tab is looking at your billable capacity. So it's basically saying, how allocated and scheduled am I to meet my billability targets? Are you guys setting billability targets on your users? Do you know?
So, sorry, say that again?
Do you know if you guys are setting billability targets for users where you say, we target this user to have an X% billable utilization?
Not for now.
Okay, then I think for this report, I'll just default to 100 for you guys. So it'll probably just be, 40 hours a week, which is fine. Basically what this means is, in your guys' case then, this is how allocated people are to their work weeks. So David has 56% of his work week allocated, and then 100% in June. So this means that he has been allocated fully in this period of time. And then Linda has been over allocated a little bit to 133%. like I mentioned earlier, the nice thing here, this actually does include scheduled hours as well as allocations. So you can compare the two. So as you guys are doing both scheduling and allocating, you can see how much they vary.
And these percentages will be based, like I think Tessa mentioned, on the work week. So that means that for Montreal users, it'll be 7.5 hours, and for Paris users, it'll be 7, if I'm getting all these numbers right, and for the US, it'll be 8, and that'll all still be relative, and you'll be able to see how staffed they are.
Perfect.
Yep. And just another example of one of the chart types you can do. Like I mentioned, you can do line graphs and whatnot in here. We also have these headline metrics that you can do, which are kind of just summary numbers that we'll put at the top. So you can see overall we're allocated about 77% across the whole account based on whatever we're filtering for. Looks like we're just filtering for one role. You can actually grab more of those if you want to expand that out a little bit. And again, these should generally be fairly similar. It's just comparing your allocations to what's been scheduled. The next tab is sort of the inverse. While this is saying how allocated and how scheduled I am to my work week, this is the inverse of how available are my resources based on what I've already been allocated or scheduled. So for example, you can see Kevin, he's only been allocated and scheduled about 25% of it, or it looks like he's been allocated and scheduled 75% of his time. So he has 25% availability within May. And then it looks like he starts to become a little bit more available as future months go on. I'm going to change the date filters to be a little bit less in the past. Let's see if we have some more going on here.
So it's really that's what I think what's her name, Stephanie, was telling me, Jordan. For a resource manager, it's really to have those two windows, right? The master planning on one, and that one inside window where they can toggle through the who's available and so on, and make like rapid decision on. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, generally you'll have that open in two places so that you can kind of look at the data and then see how you need to make changes from here.
And so when they do booking in the master planning, it will only appear in Insight an hour later. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, so the way the data load works is at the top of every hour, we begin the data load process. So any data that you enter within, let's say between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., let's say you enter data in that frame of time. At 10 a.m., the data load process will begin, and usually the loading takes between, let's say, 20 and 40 minutes. It can vary. So generally by somewhere between 10:20 and 10:40, the data that you entered before 10 o'clock will show up. And then that happens every single hour, where at the top of every hour, at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, etc., at the top of every hour, the data load process kicks off and loads the data that was entered in the previous hour.
Isn't that a bit long for especially resource manager that might make a lot of decision within the same hour and realize only an hour later that, my insights data was not totally accurate?
Yeah, that can certainly make it a bit trickier with these sort of reports. This can be a little more useful for analytical purposes. That is definitely a limitation that we've recognized. I know that we're hoping to make some adjustments to the analytics reports to be a little bit more inclusive of that sort of data, but I don't know when or where yet. But that is a goal of ours, to provide more real-time reporting for that kind of visibility. Okay.
How's how it goes, in usage? You're using the platform this way, and we'll see if it's a concern or not from our resource managers.
Okay. Alrighty. Moving on. Next couple tabs we have here, they basically just summarize when people are scheduled to work. So this first tab, daily schedule, it's just for scheduled hours. And this is really more that day by day view rather than having it be spread across many weeks. This is just when are people supposed to be working on things. It breaks down each of the users and how many hours they're logging each day. And again, there's a drill in, so you can click in to see the specifics. So in this case, you can see what project he's supposed to be working on and for how many hours.
And when I see the productive hours, that means it's billable?
This is based on productive means non-billable, but not admin internal. Do you guys have admin internal projects set up?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so basically any time that is logged or that is scheduled that is not billable and is not in the admin internal project is going to fall under the category of productive. Productive is a non-billable but not admin or internal time.
This is something I don't think we've talked about for a while, Richard. So this is just like a naming, this report is kind of built off of a naming convention on those admin or internal projects. So any project that would be deemed non-productive just needs the term admin or the term internal in the project title, or I believe in the project description, right, Tessa?
Yes.
And then this report will know that the time log to those projects are non-billable, well, obviously non-billable, we know that by the time entry, but non-productive as far as this report is concerned, and any other non-billable time on the account will be considered productive non-billable time.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is an example in this demo account. This is the yellow section here is flowing from this project because it has the word internal in brackets at the end of the project name. So this report knows, pull the hours from this project and put it into this bucket.
Okay.
Okay. And you'll see something similar as well with some of our utilization reporting. I know we'll revisit that once we have more of a decision on if time's going to flow into Mavenlink or not. But this is all working off of the project naming conventions.
What's a PTO?
This is if you have a PTO project. Are you guys using the PTO like a time off feature, or are you guys using the project? Jordan, do you know?
They're using they're using the feature, and Workday is pushing all that PTO into Mavenlink. So they we might just want to adjust this. Do we have a version of it now, Tessa, that can look at the PTO time instead?
Yeah, so I don't remember if we've updated this report, but we have updated the utilization reports to work off of both time off and let me see. Let me just show an example real quick. I'll double check though to see if we've updated resourcing. I don't remember if we have, but I know we've done it for this one, where in this report, which looks basically exactly the same as this one, except this is for time entries. The time off red section here includes any time that's logged via the time off feature or the PTO project. So in your guys' case, this would show as that time off time. And then you could also see we have a nice new tab here for out of office time. So if you wanted to see the specifics of where that time is going, such as who's going to be off when, you can see that here, and when holidays are occurring, and the % of time that is spent out of the office in specific periods of time.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay. Anyways, switching back. So this just summarizes when people are being scheduled to work on certain things. We also have the daily allocation tab, which is functionally very similar, but it's just based on allocations rather than the scheduled hours. So you can kind of see both in here. So this table is quite similar to what I showed you guys earlier in staffing that allocations tab. It's just the one in resourcing is going to be more granular because it's day by day. And then in the allocations tab, this is more of a week by week breakdown. But this is going to be pretty similar to what you're seeing here. And this also doesn't show the project. This just shows how much time is each person being allocated per day.
Okay.
Okay. let's see what else I want to review here. One other one that I wanted to review is this exceptions one. This just allows you to more easily compare the variance between your allocations and your schedules. Ideally, again, they should be fairly similar, but if there's a large variance between them, you can see that here. The idea being, you know, whoever's allocating the hours should be distributing some amount of those hours, and then the schedules should generally try to conform. So you can see if you're going over with your scheduled hours, or if your allocations tend to be higher, or if they're generally the same, such as in this case here. All right. Any questions for this one or any of the other ones we went through on this dashboard?
No, that one's pretty useful. It's going to be very useful for our resource manager.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And you guys can also, again, you can filter by managers and roles and whatnot, but we might also, again, probably want to add some custom filters on this one that'll be more aligned with the custom fields that you guys have.
Got it.
Alrighty, I'm going to skip the last three because I think they're a little bit less useful. Another dashboard I did want to get to was the project health dashboard. And this is going to be more of that project management sort of view. Oh, and by the way, you're going to see this last data load section here at the top of all those standard dashboards too. This is telling you which data load is the most recent. So like I mentioned earlier, at the top of each hour, that's when the data load will begin. So right now it's 1 o'clock PST for me. Because it's 1:42 p.m. This means that the 1 o'clock data load has completed. So any data that I've put into the system before 1 o'clock should now be in my reports. And then when 2 o'clock rolls around, this is probably still going to say 1 o'clock. It'll probably say 2 o'clock around 2:20, 2:30 once the data has finished loading in. And it should update to whatever your guys' time zone is. It won't say PST. It should say Eastern time. And then Paris will say whatever Paris time is. Okay. So this dashboard, it's a summary of all your projects and basically how well your projects are doing, with a lot of opportunities to dive into what is making your project doing well or not doing well. Are you guys aware of the project health statuses that you guys can set? Where you can say this project is red, yellow, green.
Yes.
Cool. So this is where all that information flows in.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
No, it's just we haven't really tested yet, but we will very soon. But we're fully aware of that function.
Okay, awesome. So this is the main area where this will flow in. I think this is the only standard dashboard that we have that pulls that information in. And of course, if we want to customize something, we can do that there too. But this dashboard really brings all that together. And it shows you basically the most current status. So whatever the most recent status that you've put for these projects is. And the nice thing is you can compare how did we define the project to be status-wise? So what did our PM or whoever's populating the status, what do they think of this project? How do they think it's going? And you can compare that with calculated fields to see, does that actually match up with these calculations that we have? So for example, are we going way over our budget? How is our margin looking? How is our pace? Has there been a lot of issues that have popped up? How are our hours burning, etc.? So this is really just going to bring together the PM defined statuses and actually calculated fields. I think in your guys' case, since we haven't determined what to do with time entries yet, we'll probably hold off on this component, especially the finances, but there's a lot of other components that'll still be useful in here. As you go through the tabs, it is no longer a portfolio where it's summarizing all your projects. It actually dives into the specific project. So if I were to click on this one, for example, it'll take me to the next tab, filtered only for this project. So I can see the very specific details of that one. So you can compare the time that's being logged on the project with what's been scheduled, and then the number of hours that have been estimated on the project on the tasks. And And then you can do all sorts of comparisons, such as what's our percent complete based on the time that's been logged out of what we've estimated. What's our EAC going to be? So based on what we've done so far and what we are scheduled to do in the future, are we going to land over or under? You can also compare that with project durations, and you can even compare your hours burned with the calendar duration. Ideally, these two should be pretty close, where the amount of time that I'm spending on this project should generally align with how far into the project we are. Obviously, things aren't always evenly distributed, but this discrepancy is pretty darn high. So we probably would not want this unless we just finished our project really, really fast. And then margin, you guys probably won't be using this. And then the task milestone issues, it just summarizes what have we done on the project so far, what is there still left to do, and how many issues have been popping up, and how long have they been open for.
I have a question for you, Jordan, and maybe John. How disciplined are your clients with the project status?
The project health, do you mean?
Yes, project health. Like going in that window and
because I don't
Mhm.
because I don't tend to talk to them after like implementation, I don't know how good they are at it. I always recommend once a week, and I don't really, or at the very least after main like key project changes, just to make sure that you memorialize at that point in time what's going on. At least put a project health report in each time like the project is at risk, and then hopefully after it's out of risk.
You don't have any stats on
I probably
how many clicks do you have on each reports?
Probably somebody else does. I just don't have that off the top of my head. I can try and dig into it. We have some statistics and usage on how people use the Mavenlink, but also, I mean, there's some of it that's like it's your data, so we can't dive into it too much. We actually are pretty removed from it in a lot of ways. But yeah, we can see if somebody else has a little bit more information on how
It's not a requirement. It's just by curiosity, because I think for our project manager, this is kind of that's going to be completely new for them. And this is clearly for our office managers, so they can, the executives, so they can keep a high level view of the projects in their office, and to see what projects are at risk and where they might have to do some direct intervention with the clients, instead of having numerous meeting and
exactly. It's at least that first red flag, so it is really nice. I know when we first actually rolled it out internally, we had meetings with like our delivery managers, so we basically had rules in place to make sure that we were doing it at a regular cadence, to help us remember to do it at a regular cadence. So stuff like that can help in like having those people who are looking for those updates being like, hey, I noticed this hasn't been updated since August, and now we're almost to the end of September. Can you go ahead and...
Yeah, I was going to say Jordan gave a lot of good guidance there. I think, even internally, as a project manager, I update it weekly. And I think the consistency is important, because it does funnel into different reports essentially, and different processes. So I try to, depending on how many clients you have and so forth, but I try to kind of pick a day for each client. Some people will kind of align it with when the project status call is. Some will say by the end of the week, I'm going to do all my clients on Friday. I think it just really depends, but I think whatever you make as far as a process, I think at a minimum once a week is really ideal. I think, and Jordan made some good points. I think it does make sense if there's like a dramatic change to kind of have an off-cycle health report that gets posted or that gets done, but it can be difficult to manage. I think if you're doing it like every couple of days or something, it can almost be counterproductive. So I'd say a weekly basis is ideal.
Okay.
And Richard, if this is something that's completely new, it might be hard to get in kind of that the swing of things. So you might want to come with, this is our new system. We really want to be able to get greater insight into our into our projects, and we're doing that by reporting. And this is one data point that we're really finding to be something that we want to use moving forward. And if weekly would be too much, as Jordan had kind of indicated, you might want to do it kind of by milestone or deliverable or something like that.
All right, fair enough. Thanks. Ça va être un gros changement. Énorme. Ouais. Le nombre de meetings qu'on a à l'interne. Keep going, Tessa.
Yeah, just a heads up too, Tess. I don't know if there's any like more critical reports you want to show. I know we got 10 minutes left, so not that this is the last time we'll talk about reporting, but for purposes of this call.
Yeah, so let's we'll just spend a couple more minutes on this one. I think this is the last major dashboard I wanted to show, and then we can talk through any customizations that we want to do that's come out of this meeting. Okay, I'm just going to run through a couple more tabs real quick. I'm actually going to skip the middle ones. One that I did want to show you guys was the summary status tab. I think Jordan had mentioned earlier that you guys might be interested in some project status reporting. So this could be a good baseline to start with. It's really just a summary of these are the tasks that have been completed. This is what's in progress. This is how much more time we have to work on them. And then these are the issues that have popped up. So this is based on the issue task status that you can set. So it's really just intended to be a summary of, what tasks have we done, what is not done, and what needs to be done, when do we need to have it done by, and what issues have been popping up, as well as the general statuses of the project. So we intentionally did not include budget and client as fields in here, so that this could be client facing hypothetically, where you could just export this page to PDF and send it to the client to say, this is overall where we're at and how we're doing. Of course, make adjustments to this. Some clients often add like a filter to say, I just want to see what's been done this week, or what tasks are due, due next week, or whatever it is. There's definitely more that we can do here, but this is just supposed to be a very straightforward, sort of simple status report.
Awesome. Okay.
Any questions on this one?
No, it's very clear.
Okay. All right. And next, we also have task actions, which is pretty similar to the previous tab, but it's, I would say, a little bit less client facing, and it just has more information on it. So it shows how many hours have been scheduled for that project and estimated, as well as how many hours have been worked on it so far. And it also allows you to perform some more budget analysis of, this is how much of the budget we've used so far, and then this is what's left. And I also like this chart because it just summarizes what % of the total tasks on the project have been completed, what % are in progress, and what % are issues that are open. So this gives you a sense of how much more there is left to do on this project. And then the tables are pretty similar to the tables in the previous tab, but they also contain hours information, as well as how many people are assigned to the task. Just a little bit more granular. Any other questions here?
No, it's very clear.
All right, so I think that's all I wanted to run through with you guys as far as the standard reporting for now. And of course, we can revisit these again, and we can also revisit other dashboards as needed as we make a few more decisions. But I just want to give you a sense of what you can do and the kind of reporting that exists, and the ways that you can customize it. So that being said, is there anything that stands out to you that we know we want to start customizing, or any, reports that we know we might have a gap for?
Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very clear. I learned a lot. We still have internal meetings to just talk about the reports. At this point, I can say I would be very surprised that we would customize anything for this first phase. Maybe there's one field we might want in one of the reports, but yeah, I don't have any anticipation on that for now.
If I, I'm so sorry, Richard, I kind of interrupted you, but I just wanted to interject there really quickly. If I might suggest, instead of thinking about where you might want new different reports, if you could think about some of the reports you saw today and let Tessa know what additional custom filters you might want on those reports, because I think you guys are going to want filters like hierarchy and a lot of the custom fields that we've added, and that would be a really good easy place for her to start while you guys are also thinking about what you might need custom.
Okay, so it's more additional filters based on custom fields, right?
Yep, and that's something she can show you how to do, but it's also something that she can help with configuring.
Okay. Okay, we'll have a look at this. And John, please just a reminder to send me that video, because I'm gonna circle it around to a few people so they can see this, and it will trigger some conversation internally regarding the reports.
Will do. I'll send that out within the next 20 to 30 minutes here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks
you.
for your time. Thanks, Tessa.
Thank you.
Another
Thanks,
new
guys.
chapter for me in the Mavenlink world.
Yes.
We'll talk.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.